Geography and You presents.
Hello and welcome back to Building Educated India, a GNY live podcast series where we dive deep into the National Education Policy 2020, exploring its promises, challenges, and impacts on India's education landscape. I'm Hiteshika, your host, and joining me today is our discussant, Dr. Sulagna Chattopadhyay, Editor in Chief, Geography and You. In this episode, we turn our focus to a critical aspect of the national education policy, the provisions for marginalized communities. While the policy claims to be inclusive, does it truly address the structural inequalities that persist in India's education system? To help us unpack these crucial issues, we are honored to have with us Miss Annie Namala, a leading voice in education equity and social justice. With her deep expertise in policy analysis and grassroots advocacy, she will help us navigate the implication of NEP's approach to socio-economically disadvantaged groups, the effectiveness of proposed scholarship and incentive programs, and the reality of implementing special education zones. From concerns about dilution of affirmative action to the debate over privatization of higher education, today's discussion will shed light on whether NEP is a game changer for marginalized communities or a policy that risks reinforcing existing disparities. So let's get started. Dr. Chattopadhyay, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hiteshika. And thank you, Annie, for making the time for us and being with us today. So, we want to talk about the disadvantaged communities. And you've had a lifetime of work on disadvantaged communities. You worked in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai, and you worked with agricultural communities. So you have a fair idea of what is happening at the grassroots. Now, if we see the NEP, and we have now a single category. We have a single category called Socio-Economically Disadvantaged Groups, which is the SEDGs. Now, I mean, there are so many issues with marginalized communities. If we have one group, do you think it would help better access, or there's vertical stacking of access in certain communities? Would that become more horizontal? What is your view of this, having this one group of people?
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here, particularly talk about the education opportunities and issues with marginalized communities. To your question on the SEDG, my sense is, it's not only a sense, it's also the apprehension, because I don't think the SEDG is an effective or efficient way of passing on education to marginalized communities. Why do I say that? I say it's not effective because when you're targeting a program, you need to deep dive into the program. You need to see what are the critical challenges of that particular community so that you are able to address those challenges. Rather than broadening the group, the current need is actually to deep dive, because we know even within scheduled castes, there are inequalities between the communities. Now you take a group like nomadic communities, they are nowhere in the education system. So how do creating something like an SEDG reach these different communities? It's very difficult for it to reach. And I would also say it's not so, in terms of effectiveness of reaching, we would not be able to reach the most marginalized ones. In terms of efficiency, I would say that at the end of the program, you may still have the same unequal system of the marginalized at the bottom, remaining at the bottom, because in such a system, the little better off will corner the benefits rather than those at the very bottom. And again, the historically disadvantaged groups, they have challenges like prejudices, bias, discrimination, and this is across the society. So you are placing a lot of power and authority on people who are making the decisions on who will access this provision, rather than making it a right for those citizens that need it most. So I somehow don't think that broadening a category like SEDG to reach the most marginalized and decrease the inequality, that's not a good strategy for actually reaching the most disadvantaged. And I would say, historically disadvantaged communities have a complex system of disadvantages. It's not just one disadvantage in terms of education or economy or anything. It's like a multiple complex interrelating kind of disadvantages that, unless you really look at the contextual situation today, as communities are deep diving into themselves and saying that we want our identity to be affirmed, we want a place at the table, we want to look at our disadvantages to see how to get it done. So broadening such a category only becomes an administrative farce rather than really making it realistic and relevant for the most marginalized communities.
Now, so there's an interesting idea in the NEP which talks about, and you'll be able to tell us, throw light on this, that there are certain areas with a large number of marginalized communities. And there, if you establish what they call an SEZ, it's an interesting idea, but sounds like a factory, but it's not. It's special education zone. So,
Not special economic zones.
yeah. So, do you think that it would benefit, like you said, that there were a large number of, so if the communities are in a certain place together and we have an SEZ established there, don't you think it would help?
See, the idea of SEZ, if it is taken, special education zones, if it is taken, because even earlier in our policy, we've had special zones for education. It is a positive step. But then, how do you frame an SEZ? That is very important. If it is like collecting things together, concentrating, centralizing things, it's not going to help. Like, you just think of one district. Even in the SDGs, one of the key things that Government of India has done is localizing the SDGs, which means bringing it down to the ground level. But if you take the district as a ground level, a district has hundreds of different communities.
Correct.
And unless you are really mapping the communities, so an SEZ cannot be a centralized idea. It has to be a very decentralized idea where you're really looking at where the marginalized communities are, mapping them, trying to understand their contextual challenges, engaging them in how strategies can be made. It cannot be like one fit for all size kind of thing, but it has to be, if it is done in the sense of a decentralized agency building, stakeholder building, community participation, civil society organization participation, that you're able to understand within the districts what are the categories. And it is quite possible because we do have a decentralized system. There's a district collector, there are so many officers, there are block education officers, there are gram panchayats. So it has to be something in that sense of really wanting to look at the real challenges of these communities, mapping them, being able to look at strategic ways in which those can be addressed, maybe additional financial resources, maybe other infrastructure resources. So you really are looking at a very decentralized, community-oriented solution and strategies. Then the SEZ works. If you're looking at SEZ as an administrative solution, it does not work.
I see. Now, I just want to take up something that you just mentioned, like you have been mentioning through the interaction we had a little while ago and then again here. So you said data has a very important, like the data for marginalized communities plays a very important role for planning all of this. What kind of data do we have currently?
See, currently that's a huge debate because even if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, there's a whole lot of indicators which are considered tier 3 indicators for which there is no data. Now, you just look at scheduled caste communities. There are about 3,000 scheduled caste communities across the country. Scheduled tribe, there are about 700 plus. Nomadic and denotified communities, it's supposed to be 1,500 communities. Now, each of these are diverse and different, and their data is also unequal. And we don't have, like, if you look at other than the census, we don't have, whether it is labor force participation, NFHs, they're all sample data. So you don't really understand the kind of complexity any particular community has. So the United Nations have currently, and many of us are part of that, called citizen data. What we are saying is the government is able to produce some level of data, but it does not really go down to those marginalized communities for whom there is no data, which means there's no proper planning also. So what they are suggesting now is that help communities to generate their data and have that to complement the national data, so that you can understand, like we just finished a study of 400 households of denotified communities in Rajasthan. And these don't figure anywhere. Even in our government category, denotified is not a category like scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, minorities. They get distributed between scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, general community, OBC. So you don't even see them. It is like the Prime Minister's Ranke Commission and Idate Commission that actually brought out some information on them. And these communities are so far away from education. In this 400 households, 69% of adult men have never gone to school.
Can you imagine?
86% of adult women have never gone to school.
Oh my.
So that's like historical disadvantage that they are. And today their lifestyle also doesn't help them to really come into education adequately. So what was the UN is now, the Statistical Commission and department is saying, help citizens to generate the data so that it can help policy making. And I'm happy to say that some of us have been very much part of this whole debate called citizen data. And very recently, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, MOSPI, and NEP have agreed that, citizen data is essential for us if we have to reach the last mile development challenges, that principle of leaving no one behind. So I would say that it is almost unimaginable the type of diversity you have even in something like a denotified community. There are shepherds, there are salt sellers, there are the snake charmers, there are the acrobats, there are the singers. It's like, a whole plethora of communities. Now, if you want to do a policy for them, you need to really sit with them to see how a particular policy can be implemented and what is the best way. And you need data to say that. And we have a system of decentralized three-tier government, state, national, and at the panchayat levels. So it should be possible. It is possible to do it. And it is something that has to be promoted, supported, worked. I'm happy to say that the MOSPI has come on board a little bit now to say that we would use citizen data to support policy making.
So they will.
Yes, they will.
Maybe, it is the
Civil
kind of
society is quite a bit in front of it also. So.
Yes, and also maybe the distress that we are blinded with no data is really irking the researchers right now. It's an important, because I know we are blinded. We don't know what's happening.
True.
So now just moving further from there and coming to enrollments. And if we can talk about how scheduled castes or scheduled tribes, the enrollment rates are falling, and deeply so for the scheduled caste community and the scheduled tribe community. But to say that, I want to know about the scholarships really, that, after 8th, till 8th, education is free, and then one should be equipped enough to do whatever else they want to do after that. But do you think you believe that? Do you agree that scheduled caste children or scheduled tribe children are at par with other children when they cross the class 8 threshold? Or do you think there should be further handholding? Like we do have scholarships beyond class 8 for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe children. Do you think that's important, or you think it's okay to have good education, quality education, etc., SEZs and all of that, and we don't need anything further?
The NEP itself talks about these 5 principles: access, affordability, accountability, equity, and quality. And these are not NEP's principles. It's been there from, a long time. See, where I would say is like, what is the monthly income of 50% of families in India, less than 10,000, even 5,000. So the economic status of these families are so dire that just saying that they can send their children to school without an additional support is really not realistic.
Okay.
See, like even if you have to send 3 children to school, it means you have at least an expenses of 6,000 to 8,000 rupees per year. I'm talking of year. And which means 25,000, and that family doesn't have that. So I would sort of say scheduled caste and scheduled tribe come into these because they are the large majority of these families that are earning less than 10,000. And our economic survey says that families are earning only this much. So when a country has families earning this much only, to say that we will provide education in the schools and children have to come there when they have travel expenses. Like I know even today, in Bihar and UP, many children do not go to college even once a month. They go only 2 times a month just for some notes or something, because travel is costly and time is not there, or they have to go for work. So even this whole open learning is because many of them are working in some form or the other. So in such a situation, to say that you don't need scholarship and think that they will come into education, I don't think it is going to happen. Even this whole thing of having tests in 3rd standard, 5th standard, 8th standard, I think that will sort of push out a lot of children. Because, the RTE was done with an idea that it facilitates children to get a sense of education till 8th standard,
Yes.
by which time then they are into, testing and other things. But if you start testing a 3rd standard child in a rural area where a family has not had an access to education, what would that child know? Today, even ASER report every year comes up with the kind of learning levels we have. So testing is for what? Testing is only for weeding out them, not really for helping them to move forward. So I would say that it is very, very problematic in poor households, particularly a scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, where there are many other priorities of earning for the family, of taking care of the family, early marriages, migration. So without addressing these things, the goal of ensuring everybody goes to school till 12th standard is not real. I mean, the simplest thing is to extend RTE Act, which gives a right to children to be able to study. Not just a policy, but the NEP does not really extend the RTE Act to say that it becomes a right. See, like I'm a senior citizen. I'm so happy with that senior citizen board in the metro. I go there and I say, this is my place. Can you get up and give it to me? If it was not there, I would find it difficult. So I'm saying right always provides the rights holders a space to really demand. And today, people want education. Parents want to send their children to school. They're sending them to those private schools. They are doing tuitions. So when the demand is there, how do you ensure that the services are there? System works for it.
Just a small, idea that if at all an examination is held at class the 3rd standard and further, say 5th standard and all, is it not a reflection of the teacher as well? Can you ensure better teaching if, for example, the outcomes compared to another school or another set of schools, and you find that the outcome for this particular school is not too good, so you can kind of get better teaching out of it? Is that a possibility? Not really pushing out students, but ensuring quality teaching?
See, then the whole idea of testing does not have to be an end-line testing. It is an assessment that you do periodically so that you understand the there's a formative assessment format. You understand the child's learning, and even RTE doesn't prevent you from doing formative assessment. It's only saying don't do that end-line assessment and push the child out.
Okay.
So if you really are looking at improving the system, you don't need to cut off and say that this child, if it doesn't come up with this many marks, can't come back to school. You should be facilitating the child to go and then using it as a reflective method for improving the system.
Perfect. Now, so now I move on to gender part. So now we have in the NEP a gender inclusion fund, and it seems very forward-looking because it has females and transgender as well. And I would like to know from you also that how this, like Beti Bachao and Kanyashri, I mean, how is this different from the Gender Inclusion Fund, and what does a Gender Inclusion Fund mean?
See, all these are silos of different ministries. Beti Bachao is from the Women and Child Department. Kanyashri also, I think, is from the Women and Child Department. Whereas the Gender Inclusion Fund comes into the Education ministry. So in some ways they are silos. But if you look at Gender Inclusion Fund, I think, having the LGBT there is a progressive thing.
Yes.
Because, like naming them and bringing them in is really progressive. But if you really look at what are the challenges girls have today for education, one is general challenges. Secondary schools are not available. Streams that you want are not available. Science streams are not available. Commerce streams are not available. And quality education is not available. So that's a primary thing you need to change. And then beyond that, the challenges in terms of family pressure, in terms of finances. I know a lot of children talk about not having the money to actually complete their secondary schooling or higher. So financial independence to be able to study is very important. Another thing, of course, is a whole bias and discrimination that needs to be addressed. And then the whole dimension of safety. So the Gender Inclusion Fund needs to look at what is, so are we going to expand the scholarship for girls so that they can ensure that they can study? I mean, of course, you have bicycles and tuition and all that is very essential. But again, the primary thing is to address these things. So the financial challenges, the gender discrimination, safety issues. I mean, already we have vending machines that are providing us, pads and things like that. Toilets. I mean, like that's like basic. It should not be for Gender Inclusion Fund to have toilets in schools.
Yeah.
So how do you use this fund? It is a positive step, but how do you use this fund? Are you just going to use it for the, ticking the box of providing a few things, or are you really using it to help girls to become that agents and leaders of change?
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll have to wait and watch, I guess. Now, I need to know from you, because you will be able to tell us that schools where so several village schools, they get merged together when the enrollment rate falls, and so people. So I want to know from you, because is it because the number of kids in that area falls, or is it because of the private school in that area which is getting hold of all these young people? And even if it's a lot of money, parents are, like you said, they want education, so they are willing to dish out that additional money for possibly English education. So what is your understanding of this?
This is a side. I'm quite surprised at the plan to have higher education in local languages. I'm just wondering who's wanting this higher education in local languages when the whole demand is for English education. Yes. And that's at a level where you're actually going to compete with somebody for an employment. And your local language is not going to help you for that employment. So this policy has some kind of, contradictory things, and it talks about making government schools attractive. But we know privatization is so much, it's growing every day, and even in the remotest kind of, areas. Our population is increasing, so the number of children can't be decreasing. And we have about 40% of our children who are, the population who are about 18 years and things like that. So it's not that the number of children are decreasing. Number of children are increasing. It is the private schools, particularly the budget private schools that have come. And they are not really budget.
They are not.
That is another thing. So, and that trend is going to continue unless the quality or the perceived quality in the government schools are going to improve. But many families I have seen, their income is not very steady. It's not like they had a salary. This year they may earn, next year they will not earn. So when they don't earn, they'll pull out the child from the government school and put it in the from the private school and put it in the government school.
Yeah, okay.
So the government clustering these schools and making it non-accessible. See, the whole premise of RTE Act was that there is a school which is accessible to the child. 1 kilometer for the primary levels, 3 kilometers for the middle levels, and 5 kilometers for the secondary levels. And now you're going to make a complex where even the primary will have to go that far.
Yeah.
And many children are not going to be able to go. One, because of in remote areas, you don't have transport, you don't have the money, you don't have children who can go along with children. And the whole dropping out will be much higher with these complexes. It may be a good idea in an urban area to have something like that because it is accessible. But in these remote areas, if you look at tribal areas, one mountain will have 10 families, another mountain will have another 10 families. So you're thinking of these kinds of complexes which are really not realistic. But at a block level or somewhere, you need a resource complex, which can be, and that system was put in terms of cluster resource centers, block resource centers. There is a system already. Now you're sort of reworking that whole system. And most of all, I would feel that this whole idea of this whole structural change needs money.
Yes.
Needs budgets. And our budgets have not increased.
Not increased, yes.
So how are you going to actually make these changes? We've sort of waited 50 years for some changes to happen, and now the frame is changed, so which means you cannot compare the old with the new. So another 50 years we'll have to see how this structure is put in place and is going to be realized.
Deliver. Yeah, how it will deliver.
So it's not a, and I would sort of say that knowing that there is so much of privatization in education, the state has to come in to really regularize that in terms of fee structures, in terms of learning abilities, because the government surely is not delivering to all the children. So there has to be other mechanisms. And when there are so many other private institutions growing up, this is another sector. But then how do you regularize it and ensure that it is providing the kind of education that is meant for it? English and computers is the attraction in the private schools.
Yeah, indeed. Yes. Okay. So that kind of brings me to the end of our discussion today. But I would like you to give us some few, like you said, 50 years hence is what we are looking at. And it's been 5 years now since the NEP has really come into being. So what is, in your view, the first positive outcome that we can see maybe in another 3-4 years? The one positive outcome that you think could happen or would happen with the NEP?
See, one positive thing I really look forward to is the early childhood education.
Okay.
Because NEP says that every child will be provided the early childhood 3 years of preparatory phase. If we can ensure that and assure quality in that place, it is one of the easiest starting points that we can do, because we have a system of primary schools. But if you cluster schools, that's not going to happen because children are not going to be reaching there.
Yeah.
And the current Anganwadis are not in a you need a lot more of hand holding if the current Anganwadis has to provide that kind of learning support. But we have enough knowledge and we have enough systems that can make it happen. And so that's one area where I feel the government it's a low-hanging fruit. Because, most mothers will want a safe place for their children. But then it has to be quality, it has to be ensured and assured. But that's one step that you can do. And the second step I would feel is if they can extend RTE Act to the 12th standard, it will actually provide a lot of institutional support for children who are out of schools, institutional support for marginalized families to really look at education as a right. And there it may be, you would become a participant or a stakeholder in the process.
Okay, that seems a fair demand for extension of RT into 12 standard. Thank you, Annie, for being with us today. It was wonderful. We learned so much from you, and I'm sure our listeners will also benefit greatly. I would request Hiteshika to kindly conclude this beautiful, lovely session.
Thank you, Dr. Chattopadhyay, for steering this thought-provoking conversation, and immense thanks to Ms. Annie Namala, who has helped us dissect the promises and pitfalls of the NEP 2020 when it comes to ensuring equitable education for marginalized communities. As we have explored today, while the policy outlines ambitious initiatives, the real challenge lies in its implementation, funding commitments, and alignment with the constitutional mandates like Right to Education Act. This conversation doesn't stop here. Education is the foundation of an inclusive and just society, and policies must evolve to meet the needs of most vulnerable. What are your thoughts on today's discussion? Share your views with us on our social media channels. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to GNY Live on Spotify and YouTube so that you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Stay connected with us on Instagram. A detailed blog post with references and links related to today's discussions will be uploaded on www.geographynU.com, so be sure to check it out. Join us next time as we continue our journey through India's education landscape, bringing in experts and educators. Until then, I am Hiteshika and this is Building Educated India. Because an educated India is an empowered India. Stay informed, stay engaged. We'll see you in the next episode.